All right, good morning, YouTube. How's everybody's weekend? Everybody ready to stumble into the week? If I don't get my coffee in me, I am going to stumble, that's for sure. The struggle is real today. Let's get this thing warmed up a little bit. You got scattered rain pretty much a little bit everywhere this morning. We have got a red sky and morning. We're not taking too much warning because we're not sailors, but some of the wildfire smoke is hitting just right in the atmosphere this morning. It's a bright red sun this morning. It's pretty cool looking. How's everybody out there doing? So there's your weather just snapshot. Quite some disturbed big storms, it looks like, in Alabama, Georgia area, Mississippi. You might want to look out today. The monsoon seems to be treating Arizona and southern Nevada pretty good. There was a big old cell of storm rolling through southern Nevada, Utah, northern Arizona last night, it looked like. Would not be the place you would want to be, I don't think. Probably a lot of flash flooding, stuff like that going on. All right. You got anybody joining us yet? I don't see anybody checking in. All right. Just got a couple things up this morning. Anybody got anything they want to throw out, mention in the chat room? We'll maybe drive by on it, depending on how this goes. The weekend here was kind of hot and humid. We had a pretty good thunderstorm roll through Saturday afternoon, and it was humid before that, and it kind of stayed humid all day yesterday too. Not no Alabama humid, but for here it was like noticeable. It's kind of a big deal for us. But first thing we'll start off with this morning, the plans you put together for your bug out reasons, and everybody, you talk about trigger points and decision points of when you're gonna head out during SHTF. Well, I think we found one that I don't think anybody thought of. Bugging out of town because of an iceberg. So I guess there's an iceberg that has ground ashore in Greenland. Now, maybe if you're in Greenland, you might take the opportunity to make your plan to, hey, if an iceberg comes, I need to be ready to bug out. But you didn't necessarily think about that, I don't think. And that's exactly what they're concerned about. And you see playing in the video is they're worried about this iceberg breaking off and a larger piece causing basically a tidal wave into the town. As you can see some of the video here as the iceberg breaks up during the summer. That's what they're worried about. This thing breaking off a large chunk, causing a mini tsunami right there near the town, and boom, half the town's flooded. It's 11 million tons of iceberg has ground ashore. There's a risk that it could cause a tidal wave and blast into the village. They are hoping to get it dislodged soon. And maybe this is the iceberg they need to tow to Cape Town, but it's kind of on the opposite side of the world. They're trying to get one off the Antarctica, I'm sure. Greenland's a little farther away, but it's only a town of 170 people. The shoreline in Inarssuit village. And apparently this isn't the first time these get stuck on, it's not an unusual event, I guess. but they are concerned about this large chunk flooding the town. So you need to change your protocols for your bug out plans to, in case of iceberg, do X. I just found that amusing. Of all the bug out situations I've found, the possibility to leave town because of an iceberg causing a tsunami was not one that was on our list that I was aware of. I've never heard anybody talk about that one. So there you go, your unusual SHTF situation of the day. Hey, good morning. How you doing? Yeah, hot and dry. Right on. Morning, Walter Davis. How's the hay baling situation going? We're gonna sell the iceberg to China, or I guess we wouldn't. This is Greenland. Greenland, I think, is protectorate of Holland, basically, or something like that. The Netherlands. If not, maybe it's a Danish. One or the other. Dutch, Danish, same thing, right? One of them, and I think there was talk about Greenland forming its own country a while back. I think we talked about that in a chat as well. But anyway. Yeah, so there's a way to change your plans. Round bell, are you making the big round bells next? Not good. Square bells are done in the barn, right? Right on. So moving on, most bizarre things I've seen this weekend. So the most bizarre news that I've seen, and this is covered on several different platforms, is there are feces all over San Francisco, and apparently it's becoming an epidemic now at this level. And the mayor's seen it before, but never seen this much. How concerning is that? You get to the point to where your mayor has seen it all before. So yeah, San Francisco has people breaking down in the middle of the street and side alleys and everything else, I guess, using the streets as their personal toilet, as Miss Cheer. This is partially based on an NBC Bay Area interview that Zero Hedge is using here. She admits it's a huge problem. She's originally from San Francisco, so she's seen it progress. And her quote, "I will say that there is more feces on the sidewalks than I've ever seen growing up here. That is a huge problem. We are not just talking from dogs." Right? Oh, goodness. Unreal. You want to talk about places to get out of. Like, it's already SHTF in San Francisco. Seems to have been for some time. Her simple solution, apparently, is to ask the city's estimated 7,500 vagrants to kindly stop with the street squatting and clean up after themselves. You'd think they would have done that already, just human decency, but I get, they don't believe in that cultural norm thing in San Francisco. They abhor cultural norms. They like to shun that stuff. Looks like they're going to try to rely on nonprofits to get the job done, to hopefully bring some of the people in and get them off the streets and whatnot. But how's the town going to clean this mess up? Would probably be the second question. In addition to their fecal matter problem, it's not restricted to that either. Apparently, the city is full of drug addicts who are more or less allowed to do just their thing. 2 days after the mayor was sworn into office. So I guess she was just sworn in recently. I guess she was sworn in Wednesday potentially or Tuesday. So Friday, she went a jaunt around the city this afternoon where a guy was literally prepping to shoot up as she walked past. That's quality stuff right there. Right, Walter? When you when you had talked about this is a shitty town, you hear people quote that, other places like, no, literally, San Francisco. It fits, right? It's like it's sad. If you haven't been to San Francisco, too late. Don't go now. It might be centuries before this ever turns around. It's even made it to Twitter as the mayor was touring the area. This tweet went out. The video of this guy prepping his needle. It's a don't ask, don't tell situation, I think, there for drug use as well. San Francisco will spend about $280 million this year on homelessness and services for the homeless, 40% higher than the city spent 5 years ago. The number of homeless has remained steady at about 7,500. Interesting. They spent $65 million on street cleaning in 2017. And they're looking at boosting that to 13 million by 13 million more over the next 2 years. My goodness. Probably not what people expect when they go to San Francisco, and it's only getting worse. So apparently people still go to San Francisco. It's starting to affect the city's bottom line, though, here, as it says. Earlier this month, a major medical convention expected to bring 15,000 visitors and drop $40 million in their week-long convention decided to permanently move to another city. That's from the San Francisco Chronicle. Yeah, you got things like that. A medical convention coming to San Francisco that can't even clean their streets. How? I mean, the Romans had this figured out. Like, seriously, people, the Romans, like, progressed in this area to the, when it came to hygiene and, clean cities and stuff. And we were talking about regression. We're beyond collapse of the Roman Empire. Anyway, kind of a longer article goes on down talking about this horrible situation in San Fran, but I would advise if you haven't been, don't go now, right? Right, Barry, the population of 7,500 really can't increase when even the bums are like, I think I'll move to another town, right? When they walk down the streets and see what's going on there. The homeless are like, yeah, I'll find somewhere else to loiter. Hey, Castaway, good morning. How you doing? Right, Walter? Yeah, you can't make there's too many jokes available for SHTF and how it applies to San Francisco in this case. It just baffles the mind. Open more Starbucks, Castaway, will that solve their problem? Maybe all the homeless will get jobs there? Is that the agenda, the jobs program? At $15 an hour starting, of course. Minimum. I mean, San Francisco, they should probably do 20, really, if they wanted to be fair and equitable and, just do that's the right thing to do, right? So our problems range from icebergs to literally SHTF in the streets. That would be our situation today, I guess. So next thing I pulled up that I saw that looked interesting was concerning the trade deficit and our Chinese tariffs and all that stuff wrapped in as Zero Hedge has titled this, "The Death of America's Fox Prosperity," or faux prosperity. I guess if you say it that way, I say fox, faux, whatever. You can read, right? You guys can read the screen. But the deadly math of this looks pretty interesting. With our record deficit, stronger dollar equals record China trade deficit. And this is straight out of Zero Hedge. They made this article, Tom Luongo, it looks like. What is it? Yeah, he's got his own website here, I guess. They just copied it over for him as a contributing commenter, I guess. Well, Walter, yeah, it's not saying the Romans were perfect, but at least they knew how to clean the streets. You know, it's just one of those examples. It's not saying they were perfect, but just keeping the streets clean is, you'd think, would not be a major task when people have been doing it for thousands of years. Get this. And the article just starts off, Donald Trump is a smart guy. I know he knows math. Too bad he's ignoring it. And this is a situation most presidents have done when it comes to trade deficits, etc. So going into it, government spending is rapidly rising. More actual money is flowing into the U.S. economy, or should we say currency if we wanted to be correct. Where is that spending going? To buy cell phones, computers, cars, office supplies, and all the rest. It doesn't matter if the purchase is made at Best Buy through purchase order, the money still goes to stuff built and imported from China. The second order effect is that even if it goes to subsidize a farmer in Iowa or a defense contractor in California, that money winds up in the hands of a consumer who does what? Goes to Best Buy and buys a new TV. That this isn't rocket science, it's simple cause and effect. More money chases goods. Despite the naysayers, Apple is selling a crap ton of $1,200 phones built where? China. So the budget deficit, thanks to record spending, is fusing the trade deficit with China that Trump is complaining about. There you go. That's a fairly good summation. And he breaks down he says, here's the math. So he breaks it down here. Big bada boom. First is the budget deficit numbers that add up to 9 months of fiscal review. As we've talked about in other posts in previous quarters, we are collecting record taxes every month now. But first up is the budget deficit number. The resulted budget, this is courtesy of Zero Hedge. That's funny. He references Zero Hedge. What a guy. June budget deficit $75 billion, better than the consensus estimate of $98 billion, an improvement from the $147 billion deficit in May, as well as slightly less than the deficit of $90 billion recorded in June of 2017. This was the second biggest June budget deficit since the financial crisis. The June deficit brought the cumulative 2018 fiscal budget deficit to over $607 billion during the first 9 months of the fiscal year, up 16% over the past year. 16%. Imagine if you were, wow. Wow. 16% over the last year. Talk about unsustainable. And, it's easy to mask over a lot of problems with just throwing a bunch of money at stuff. Piper will come home to pay eventually. People try, we try to give Trump credit for a few things, but that's catastrophic. 16%? Seriously? But you're just kicking the can down the road to somebody else to pay for it. A reminder, the deficit is expected to increase further in the tax and spending measures and rise above $1 trillion. This guy says himself, the Post has a ton of charts to illustrate the point, but it's mostly unnecessary. The U.S. Treasury is issuing debt at an astounding rate to cover this budget. Spending goes up as tax receipts do, thanks to lower tax rates and increasing growth. More ticky, more washy. The second part of the title is the latest figures released on the trade deficit. Chinese exports to the U.S. and trade balance both hit record. Like he talked about cause and effect. All this money is getting spent, but it still ended up in China. We're causing the trade imbalance in China due to goods being imported. Red, green lines. Which one means which? Let's see. This clicks over to the, okay, there's the graph. This is from 2013 to 2018 in billions going up to from top to bottom. The aqua blue green line here is exports 12-month moving average, and the red line is a 12-month moving average of our trade balance with China. And they almost exactly mirror each other, exports and the trade balance. While exports have gone up, that's exports from China, that's the trade imbalance also goes up. So cool graph, yeah. That's from that's a Chinese graph from China Customs General Administration. It says Trump and Navarro. I hate this chart. I'm not sure who Navarro is. One step further, we have exploding interest payments on the 21 trillion pile of debt the U.S. Treasury has racked up. 1.8 trillion, which is owed to China. As anyone who runs a house knows, when you get a raise, what happens to your debt load if you increase your spending to match the raise in earnings? Nothing. It stays the same. If you're smart, your debt is all fixed rate, so your monthly outlay stays the same. But guess what? A lot of the U.S. debt is inflation linked. Treasury inflation protected security. TIPS are what's called TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. TIPS are basically a variable rate mortgage against your labor. Every American needs to hear that. TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Services, are basically variable rate mortgages against your labor. So debt servicing costs are rising quickly with the slightest rise in interest rates. Everybody still wants to naysay it, but central bank can't do this forever. Am I still coming through out there, folks? So it talks about debt servicing costs are rising quickly with the slightest rise in interest rates. The example is when you're paying 1% on $100, a rise of 2% doesn't hurt much. But when that 1% marginal rise in interest is on $20,000, now it's real money. In your household, you cut back spending. But does the government do this? That's pretty funny. Nope. Of course, the answer is no. That would be ridiculous, right? Keynesian thinking dominates economic thought. Even Chicago school guys like the chief economist advisor Larry Kudlow are effectively Keynesians when it comes to the money issuance, or basically what the central bank creates out of thin air. So inherent in this equation is the increasing interest payments on a portion of the U.S. debt held by China. It's not something tariffs can fix. The third part of the math is the yuan. China, to combat a slowing credit growth as the Fed pulls back on dollar liquidity, is devaluing the yuan to keep its banking system liquid. So they're making things cheaper. Cheap yuan means cheaper Chinese goods. Hybrid war tactics like tariffs and monetary policy adjustments are double-edged swords. There's always a counter reaction to anything. For countries that don't prepare themselves, they are left vulnerable to shifts in central bank credit creation. The severity of that vulnerability, however, can be managed by the opposing central bank. So we're basically now at the point of a war between central banks in proxy to their countries. Whoever thought you'd hear something like that? Talking about Russian Treasury holdings last month, the Russians dumped half of the U.S. Treasury. It caused a yield on the 10-year note to rise above 3%. And we've covered the bond markets and the 10-year Treasury notes and the 30-year, the flattening of the yield curve and all that quite a bit. And that they're claiming that as part of the reason for the jump above 3%, which technically, as they talk about technical indicators financially, a major technical breakdown which momentum traders could have piled onto and caused a whole lot more pain for the Treasury Department, because when that goes up, it talks that interest rate on your mortgage of your labor, that's where it goes. So the Russians, half of theirs was just under $50 billion worth. And that's their graph of Russia Treasury holdings of about 90 billion here in 2015 to April 2018, down right around 50 billion. And this is the end of Clinton close here, so hang in there. Goodness, it's that 30 minutes went by fast. China doesn't want to have to start with such drastic measures, because if you want to see a big effect on the bond market, China starts dumping bonds, it'll have a multiple effect. China has started the yuan devaluation process along with loosening monetary policy to support basically its central banking sector, and it expects to continue this as communications between Trump and China is on hold. So for here they surmise here that President Trump's math is clear and will continue to be. Stop blaming others for your problems. Clean up your own house first is the short term. Because in the short term, it says Trump will look like he's winning this trade war, but capital inflows to the U.S. will support this policy. Chinese stock markets will underperform the U.S., but that will be a function of safe haven, not because U.S. finances are structurally sound. Basically, we can use more guns to prevent people from taking people's stuff. The People's Bank of China will respond with liquidity that will look increasingly desperate and will result in a wave of defaults and a slowdown. The dollar will rise and the trade deficit will persist. So will the budget deficit, because it's math. That's an interesting article basically saying we're tumbling down a trail that these tariffs aren't going to have jack effect on, and potentially make things much worse if the central banks keep going at it back and forth based upon the way this was broke down some of this stuff. And as it says, Fox prosperity. All right, folks, that was a quick 30 minutes, I guess. I didn't know how detailed this article was going to get, but yeah, the deficit, the out of control spending is killing us and causing us to do irrational things to make people look good, to make people look like they're being productive and taking action by, putting tariffs on China, those bad people. But it's the math, as this guy explained this whole article, is working against them because they're ignoring it. Walter Davis, pass a law against math. Do it now, right? Well, that's because of this, as we know, Walter, 2 + 2 = 5. If the state says 2 + 2 = 5, right? That's going to be the new math of any administration to get themselves out of a mess like this. Doesn't look good. So everybody had a good weekend, good recovery from the weekend. We're going to wrap this up. We will see you on the back end. We'll see you again here for this morning news. Again, Wednesday. In the meantime, y'all have a good day and live free.